Welcome to Spirit Talks, because your spirit talks to you.
Hello and welcome to Spirit Talks. I'm Susie Beiler.
And I'm Maximilliam Haver.
In this episode, we are talking about sacred geometry.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy.
Max, what would you like to share about sacred geometry?
Well, sacred geometry is simply geometry that has particular resonant ratios that resonate with certain frequencies and certain aspects of your truer nature. The commonly known ones are the plutonic solids, being the tetrahedron, the cube, the sphere, the dodecahedron, the isosahedron, and also the flower of life and Fibonacci spirals, and these sorts of patterns that are in resonant ratios that life forms around and builds upon. These are sort of the basic geometries and rules that sort of preeminate this universe. It may be different in other universes, depending on their laws of physics and form and that sort of thing. So,
how do they serve us? Well, do they serve us?
Well, yes. Looking at different sacred geometries can carry different light codes and activations and information for DNA and this sorts of things, and it's simply encoded in geometric form. So while your cognitive mind might not understand exactly why something draws you or attracts you, there is a particular resonance with it that is integrating or assisting or interacting with you. And after some time, you may find that it no longer draws your attention. So this is perhaps when you've completed what you were to receive from it. And it's also the basis of a lot of the principles used in art. So a very common understanding is the golden mean, a certain proportion that you draw and scale things by to give it a lifelike look that is, or a resonant look that is not like grotesque or distorted. It has that particular ratio in how its parts relates to itself.
Gosh, that takes me back to elementary school art class.
That's good you learned it early.
I had no idea it was sacred geometry. You know, actually, when I moved from Pennsylvania, I got rid of a ton of art that I did as a kid, and I was looking at it, and I was like, I was doing sacred geometry back then. I was drawing sacred geometry. It's pretty wild.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. One of my favorite places to find sacred geometry is in nature. So if I go outside and I look at a pine cone or a honeycomb or the sunflower, if you just go outside and you start looking, or a spider web, you know, there's so many places where nature expresses sacred geometry. It's fun to draw it and, you know, to see artwork that others have done and things like that. But I love the energetics of the sacred geometry that I find in nature.
Yes. So different people will resonate with different particular sources of sacred geometry. While some may resonate more in nature, others may resonate more with self-expression or the engagement with what others have created and that type of community energy with it. It's also expressed a lot in dance and music within harmonics and these sorts of things. So sacred geometry is a pretty base sort of function of form in this universe and the laws it operates by and the resonances that you know align and transfer that sacred information from our higher aspects to our being here.
Now you'll see a lot of sacred geometry in churches and cathedrals, especially like older churches and cathedrals. Do you think that on some level, they were using that to impart, the sacred wisdom of the divine.
I think a lot of it has to do with old teachings passed down through architects and designers that were building these buildings. That's a lot of where the geometrically minded people were, is in building and designing. Makes sense. And so these were teachings of I think is like the Masons, the School of the Masons, and some other schools where they studied not only the functions and properties of these geometries and how it affected buildings, but they also would often study alchemy or chemistry and understanding how, or trying their best to understand how geometry affects molecules and atoms and matter. And so they had an understanding that it's a base building block and that it related to particular properties of this. And it's often used in understanding the energy body, which was very important, especially to esoterically knowledge people back then, is that engaging with certain aspects of the energy body will allow them to open channels and connect with divine information. This was probably their biggest reason for doing this.
And we can do that now.
Yes.
We can use sacred geometry to assist us in meditation, to assist us in accessing source knowledge. Anything else that you would use sacred geometry for? Teleporting?
Perhaps. That's probably a method of connecting with that channel and energy. Now, geometry isn't the only way. There's obviously emotions and energy flows that come in the form of knowings or other sorts of things besides just geometry, sounds, resonant harmonics, and
but
these
this
sorts
is
of
one
things.
Of the tools we can use.
One of the methods, yes. And a lot of times what happens is people will do sacred geometry when they're in a very creative state where they're simply allowing themselves to create whatever art or music or dance, and it just sort of happens naturally. And so it is inherently resonant with you because that is a lot of times that creative expression coming out of you. And so a lot of times people may think that someone has studied sacred geometry if they built, certain works of art that have these things, but a lot of times it's simply their creative intuition bringing that through, and it's that sacred information being expressed in that way.
This is a fun thing to play with. I'm excited. I got one of those mandala coloring books. I'm excited to play with that and see, if that strengthens my connection with source, or if I get any downloads or uploads, or or if it's just fun.
Well, that's a great way to start approaching sacred geometry, is having a pre-made sacred geometric shape and being able to color and engage and play with it in that creative side of your mind and expression of your talents and skills. So that's a good start and approach for people that might be looking for a way to start engaging and connecting with sacred geometry. And you can find a lot of stuff on the internet if you just search sacred geometry and see all kinds of images and art that has already been done. And usually quite beautiful, and sometimes you'll have a certain connection or sensation with certain pieces. So.
Beautiful. Well, as always, I encourage our listeners to leave a comment if there's something they have a question about or an experience that they want to share that they've had with sacred geometry. Thanks for joining us. We will see you in the next episode.
May you express your art beautifully and find the sacred geometries within your heart.